Welcome. I hope everyone has had a good week and I'd like to get started. Today Earl will be actually in the prayer room, so I'd like to, if you want to avail yourself of that, we certainly make that opportunity available to you. Speaking of the prayer room, last week I was in the prayer room and the door was open and so as always, and so I could hear snippets of Greg's lesson, and I was saying to myself, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like chapters 8 and 9. You know, it just doesn't seem to be that, and I'd already pretty much prepared chapters 10 and 11 and was ready to go with that, and Greg went on, and I kept saying, that's not chapters 8 and 9. I don't know where he's going to go with this. I should have known not to question Greg. So I got on my cell phone, looked at Stephen Matheny's list, and somebody else had chapters 8 and 9. So this is it today. So we'll take a look at those two chapters, Matthew 8 and 9 today. I'd like you to kind of think about a question. And it's what kind of authority does Jesus actually have, and really how do we respond to the authority that Jesus has? And the reason that I ask this question is that Matthew 8 and 9, we don't just hear Jesus teach, but we also watch him act. Chapters 8 and 9 immediately happened after the Sermon on the Mount that Greg did discuss last week. And Matthew deliberately says, he says that the initial events happen right after the Sermon on the Mount. So in these two chapters, I think Matthew is asking the question, does Jesus really have the authority he claims? And here in these passages, we see that Jesus demonstrates what he just taught. The big takeaway here is that Jesus' authority is not theoretical in any way. He demonstrates his authority through a series of miracles we're going to talk about today. And Matthew has, I think, very intentionally presented this material so that you can see this. The people were amazed by Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. We get that comment from Matthew. They were amazed by his teaching, but we're going to see today that people are amazed by his power over the natural world, the spiritual world, and we're going to kind of go into several of those instances today. However you count these, some scholars say we're going to talk about 9 miracles. Some say 10. Doesn't really matter. I think both of them are trying to get to the holy number, 3 by 3, or 7 plus 3, or something like that. But whatever, that's the thing that scholars like to debate. But the key thing is really what kind of miracles that we see today. I'd like someone to read the first passage and really look at Matthew 8, verses 1 through 17. If I could have a reader for that. Right.
8 through 17?
8, 1 through 17.
Okay. And when he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, a leper came to him and bowed down to him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And he stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus says to him, See that you tell no one, but go show yourself to the priest and present the offering that Moses commanded for a testimony to them. And when he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, entreating him, and saying, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering great pain. And he says to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion answered and said, Lord, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And to my slave, do this, and he does it. Now when Jesus heard this, he marveled, and said to those who were following, Truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom shall be cast out into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said to the centurion, "Go your way, let it be done to you as you have believed." And the servant was healed that very hour. When Jesus came to Peter's home, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her. And she arose and waited on him. And when evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and cast out the spirits with the word, and healed all who were ill. In order that what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet might be fulfilled, saying, "He himself took our infirmities and carried away our disease."
Thank you, Ryan. We have here three plus miracles, three specific miracles, and then maybe a generic miracles at the end of this passage. First, we have a leper that approaches Jesus. And why would this be in itself remarkable, to have a leper approaching Jesus? David?
According to the Mosaic law, if you had those skin diseases like we were describing, you were supposed to isolate yourself, and you could not come near people. You were unclean.
Yeah.
The fact
Yeah.
that this leper
Yeah.
came to the crowds was shocking.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You're supposed to look disheveled, and I mean, you're actually supposed to work at being disheveled and even torn clothes, and really to set yourself apart from the crowd. And yeah, that would be very shocking to people. What does Jesus do in return for this leper being remarkable, doing something remarkable? What does Jesus do? And he does something remarkable in return.
Touched him and healed him.
Touched him and healed him, right? Why was that remarkable? Why was the touching part remarkable?
Because you weren't supposed to touch a leper.
Why?
Because then you'd be unclean and have to go outside the congregation of Israel for about a week, if I remember correctly.
Exactly. So, I mean, he would in himself cause himself to be unclean. And so, again, it was remarkable. I'd like you to look at today, when we go through some of these miracles, just how many times Jesus makes himself ceremonially unclean. And that's going to be, I think, an interesting thing. He not only heals him, but he does something else. He restores him. And that, I think, is very, very important here, that he is actually restoring this man, because he's as an unclean person, a perpetually unclean person. We'll see that a little bit later. He's perpetually unclean. He can't participate in the community. He can't participate in the synagogue. He can't do a lot of things. He's separate. He's isolated, probably from his family and friends as well. And so Jesus, he restores him. And one thing Jesus does that's interesting is he says, "Go show yourself to the priest." I mean, that is a very common, a very important thing, part of his restoration. Go show yourself to the priest. Go through the purification rites. And this wasn't probably very easy for this man to do, because he was in Galilee and he would have to travel to Jerusalem, I believe, to go see a priest, to go through this purification rite. So Jesus gives him a challenge, but he also says, you're not only healed, but you're restored. All right? David, you...
No.
Okay. Be careful with that when you're be careful in a Bible class or in an auction. You can get in a lot of trouble there. Okay.
Sold.
Sold. Exactly. Next person comes is the centurion. Everybody in here knows this story very well. But he's a Gentile. He's a Roman commander in authority. Let's talk about this thing about being remarkable. Why does Jesus offer to go to his house? Why is that in itself remarkable, amazing?
I'll bid again. Not just the Romans, but in particular the soldiers over there were the enemy, essentially. the Jewish people, despised and distrusted him. And oftentimes the Roman citizen, the Roman soldiers, and the Roman, especially the centurion, who was a boss of those, they mistreated the Jewish people, horribly at times. So the fact that this Roman captain of the guard would come, in his uniform to see Jesus was pretty shocking.
Right, absolutely. Right.
Also, there's a matter of cleanliness again.
Absolutely.
Foreigners were not considered kosher, so if they entered a house, they had to wash themselves afterwards, just to be on the safe side.
Absolutely. The dirty Gentiles, pretty much. Stephen.
Even Peter remarks about this in Acts chapter 10 when he's invited Cornelius. He's like, it's unlawful for me to be here.
Exactly.
And spend time with you guys. But God's telling me different. So
yeah, I'm gonna hold my nose and go in. So that's pretty much what he does. What is remarkable about the centurion's faith? Okay. Jesus, has said, "I'll go with you. I'm going to go with you to heal your servant." That's remarkable. And he also says, I will make myself unclean again." Right? To do this, per Stephen's comment. But the idea is that the centurion shows a lot of faith here, and so what's so remarkable about that?
Faith versus heritage.
Faith versus heritage, absolutely. It transcends the heritage. Good. Why is his understanding of authority so important? Why is it? Centurion has a good understanding. He lives with authority. Here goes that word again we're going to keep using today. Why does he understand authority? What's so remarkable about that?
The Roman governmental structure was all about structure and authority and chain of command, and the underlings and you answer to these people. It's who's in charge. Very bureaucratic in a logical, organizational kind of way. And so this centurion had essentially 100 soldiers under him, and when he said go, they went. And he said come, they came. And the part of the remarkable is that this non-Jew, this foreigner, saw the power that this Jewish rabbi had. He saw the power, and he saw that man, Jesus, has not just power, he has authority. This Roman says, I know authority, I've got some authority. People above me have more authority. I see that Jewish rabbi has all authority.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He understood. He kind of gets it from the organizational sort of way, and Jesus had the power and authority to do whatever he wanted to do.
And he saw that Jesus could. I mean, this man, he could send his soldiers or servants or whatever to a faraway place, and even distance and distance didn't have anything to do with the authority Jesus had over. Yeah, you just say the word Jesus, and just like I can send anyone anywhere I want to do my bidding, you can too, and you have that power over disease. So I know you can heal him. All right, Stephen.
he also respected the authority of Jesus. There was plenty of Jews that leadership that saw Jesus' miracles later and wanted to kill him for it, and they wanted to claim that it came from the devil. Whereas the centurion recognized this is a worthy authority and recognized it's something to be held in esteem and respect. Yes.
So Jesus impressed him. He impressed Jesus. Jesus, what does he say famously here? Jesus tells us how much this man impressed him. What did he say?
Israel has not found such faith.
Right, correct. Ernest?
How did the centurion know that he had authority? He had been following Jesus for a while because the Romans were trying to make sure there was no disturbance, and he was keeping the crowd calm. He can't follow. So after his feet were around the crowd.
Yeah.
make sure they get orderly. And he saw the power of Jesus from a distance.
He did. He was also known as a righteous man, and he had a good reputation with the Jews. So he probably had that insight into Jesus as well. He says, "I've not found such faith in Israel." And think about the reaction that would have on the Jews hearing this. I mean, probably it would make them uncomfortable at best. It would infuriate them at worst. It would really upset them because, he's saying, Jesus, the Romans, really? What are you trying to do here? You're opening your kingdom to outsiders? Because he goes on and gives a parable about that. He says that the people in the kingdom right now may not be in the kingdom later. And the people that aren't in the kingdom now may be in the kingdom later. And so, he's saying faith is appearing where it's least expected at this time. Next story is we hear about Peter's mother-in-law. And, she's very sick, has a fever. And with one touch, the story says, Matthew says, that the fever is gone. One thing that's miraculous and marvelous about this, we've all had the flu, I guess, or had an infection or a high fever, and that feeling you get when that breaks, when it breaks, that fever, and you sweat and all that, but you're relieved of that fever, and but you're drained afterwards. I mean, that. Boy, I've been sick. And it probably takes you a few hours or a few days to recover from that. But notice this is instantaneous. It's not her fever just happened to break and Jesus was around. His touch did that immediately. And Matthew says this several times about these miracles of Jesus. They happened immediately, right then. There wasn't an off-ramp or an on-ramp or something like that. What do these miracles say to you about the nature of the kingdom? Anything at all? What prophecy is revealed here, is mentioned here?
He took on our diseases.
He took on our infirmities, our diseases, right. That's from famous Isaiah 53. And so he did that. We're seeing also that, he was willing to take on those. He was willing to be unclean for us. And we've also seen in these three, a Jew, a Gentile, and a family member or an extended family member. So it's kind of interesting who he's reacting to. Okay, if someone read the next passage, 18 through 22. Matthew 8, 18 through 22. Stephen?
And when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commands to depart to the other side. Then there a certain scribe came and said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Then another of his disciples said to him, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead."
Right in the middle of these miracles, Matthew pauses. One person who's a scribe, he says, "I'll follow you anywhere." And scribes were professional copiers at this time. They made their money by copying documents, legal documents, but most importantly, religious documents. And they would copy the scriptures and they make copies of the traditions. And so many scribes became the ultimate experts of the law. They were the people to go to in terms of understanding the law, even more so than the Pharisees. And so Jesus responds to this man. What does he say? He says what?
I'm homeless.
I'm homeless. Yeah, I'm pretty much homeless. What does that say? What's he truly saying? He's saying, following me is not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be something you can, even think about it, not only was he homeless, but his grave was borrowed. So, following me is not going to be easy. And then another person says, "I'll follow you, but let me bury my father first." I have a book at home, it's called The Hard Sayings of Jesus, and this is one of them. And the burial of a father was supposed to be the most sacred thing the son could do. To bury your father was ultimately showing honoring the fifth commandment, that honor your father and mother. And so Jesus is turning that on its head, and he's saying that even doing something like that is, following me is greater than even the most sacred family obligation. This is a hard saying. I mean, this is one of those really hard sayings of Jesus. But, it's kind of challenging the misconception that people may have about these two stories. Kind of tell you a little bit about misconceptions people have about the ease of following Jesus. It's going to be comfortable. It's going to be comfortable and happy and everything all the time. And the other one is saying that essentially that it's about priority. It's setting priority. Jesus is talking here about urgency, and David will talk about that, I think, more in 10 and 11 next week. But it's urgency, and discipleship is costly. It's urgent. It can be uncomfortable. But in setting priorities, Jesus is saying nothing takes precedence over following me. It's a tough saying, right? Okay. Any comments on that?
Steve?
Yes.
Apologies for kind of going back, but the comments that Jesus is making publicly after the centurion comes to him is yet another. It's a rattling, shocking statement that Jesus makes. So the Jews around him, and there's a lot of them following. He sees the foreigner. Not only is Jesus healing the foreigner, he's saying the foreigners are going to come in and be part of God's kingdom, not us as the sacred insiders.
Exactly.
That is a shocking, shattering kind of a comment.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why the opposition grows. Jesus is saying God's kingdom is bigger than just the Jews.
Yeah, I used to have a work colleague used to always use this expression about, he's poking him in the eye with a blunt stick, and that's kind of what he's doing here.
And it's not just that foreigners are going to be a part of the kingdom, but the fact that he mentioned they're allowed to sit down with Abraham, and Jacob, and Isaac. That it's a level of equality that, because they had proselytes before.
Yeah.
You can have people that come in and worship God, but they're still lower on the totem pole. But this is elevating them.
Exactly. Great point. Okay, next section, 8:23 through 34. Someone will read that? Okay, I'll read it. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even winds and sea obey him?" And when he came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men met him, coming out of the tomb so fierce that no one could pass that way. And behold, they cried out, "What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a herd of many pigs was feeding at some distance from them, and the demons begged him, saying, "If you cast us out, send us away into the herd of pigs." And he said to them, so they came out and went into the pigs, and behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the waters. The herdsmen fled, and going into the city, they told everything, especially what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus, and they saw him, and they begged him to leave their region. 2 types of authority that Jesus here shows. He shows authority over. What 2 realms does he show authority in this passage? Nature first. Second, spiritual world, demons, absolutely. We're all familiar with the storm scene, and Jesus is sleeping in the boat with his disciples, and his disciples are terrified of this storm. There's a little bit of an irony, I thought, here. When you think about it, some of these people are professional fishermen. I mean, they've seen storms before, in this particular area. And it's kind of irony that they're really terrified that this must be a really bad one, because they're really worried about the situation. And they wake Jesus up, and perhaps, I don't know if they expected Jesus I don't think they expected him to do what he did. But because I think maybe they were saying, wake up, we need another hand, 2 hands to bail water out of the ship, out of the boat. We need some help, Jesus. But, he speaks, and then the storm stops. It's instantaneous. It's not gradual. It happens just all at once. And what question do they ask? This is a crucial question. Who is this? Right, I like the way you said that, David. Not everybody can see your face, but yeah, who is this? Who does this? Next miracle we're familiar with. It's a Gentile-dominated area. 2 men in the tombs. They're demon-possessed men. Mark and Luke talk about 1 man, and Matthew talks about 2. If it's the same incident, not really important. We chase that rabbit, but notice I think who speaks. Who speaks? When he comes across these 2 men, who is doing the speaking? Kind of interesting if you look carefully at that. The demons are speaking. He says the men aren't speaking. Demons have completely taken over. What questions do they ask? Ask 2 questions.
Have you come to torment us before the time?
Right. It's the second one. The first one is, what do they say?
What do you want with us? What do you want with us?
Yes, Son of God. Right. So 2 questions. Very important there. He's looked at as really a disruptor. He's tormenting them before their time. A lot of scholars talk about what that means. Some people believe Jewish believe that, at the end of the age, the demons would be finally tormented, and that's pretty much what we believe as well. But, there's a tormenting stage of that at the end. He's saying you're tormenting us before our time, which may be the judgment day. Okay? Think about this, though. In this passage, the disciples ask, what sort of man, who is, as David says, who is this, right? And the demons, immediately, they say, we know who you are. We recognize who you are. And we also recognize your authority over us. And then we get the townspeople reaction. What do?
Troublesome.
Terrified.
They're terrified, right? They're not going, it says, they go out to meet Jesus, and you think, oh, good, And no, they're going to go out and say, we like you to leave, please. You've disrupted us, in some way, financially or whatever, but, they're asking to leave. They're not coming out to thank Jesus for it said that those 2 men were keeping people from traversing that area. People were afraid to go through that area. So they're not coming saying, thank you, Jesus, for getting rid of this threat and also healing this man, by the way, these 2 men. But, they're doing that. Okay. Let's move on, moving fast, but oh well. 9, 1 through 13. I'll tell you what, I think we're familiar, everybody in here is familiar with these passages, so let's just talk about, first section is about the paralytic, and then Matthew calling, and then tax collectors. Those are 3 elements in this passage. So I'd like to kind of move on so we can get through a lot of this. Okay, but notice what does Jesus react to when the paralytic shows up? It says he sees something that causes him to act. You see that? He sees their faith, right? And that's kind of interesting. And he doesn't address the paralysis immediately. What does he do? What does he say to the man? Whoa. Wow. We all know what a problem that was at this time. Sin's a bigger issue to the Jews than the healing here. We go back to Job's friends that how they kind of mess their theology up, saying that everything happens because you sinned first, and finally we figure out no, that's not always true, and so sin's a big issue. Healing's visible and temporary, but sin is forever, and so forgiveness is also forever, and so. The leader's response to this, what do? What do they say?
It's blasphemy. It's blasphemy.
It's blasphemy. It's blasphemy. You can't forgive sins. And so, I think Jesus really lays a trap for them here. he's saying you can't see forgiveness, but you can certainly see that healing is taking place. He says, if I can do a miracle healing here, that demonstrates that I can also forgive the sins of the man. And this is their belief. Well, sin was the underlying cause of this illness. So therefore, if the illness goes away, the man's sins are forgiven. So he's kind of laid that, I think that he's laid that trap out there. Next, he calls Matthew. And Matthew, of course, we know about the tax collectors. At that time, they weren't the most popular people in the Jewish realm, collaborator with Rome. And they were known for corruption, for stealing, from skimming off extra tax money to make their own living. And Jesus calls him. And it's interesting, too, he's the writer of this particular gospel. It's a good assumption in verse 10 that Jesus was at Matthew's house and he's going to a party and he eats with sinners, and that's probably Matthew's business associates. It's probably maybe some other more unsavory characters. What does this fellowship communicate? What does this communicate about Jesus?
He's willing to go anywhere.
Right.
Talk to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like what Paul says later about do anything and be anything for anything so I can save some.
Exactly.
Jesus is saying that.
Exactly. John.
It's also interesting, maybe you could say it's like a snowball effect, maybe. He reaches out to Matthew, which was a risk and something Jesus was known for doing, but then that creates opportunities with all these other people that maybe we wouldn't have even known because of this. And we kind of get in a rut where it's just all the same folks who have been Christians forever. When you kind of break that down and start reaching out a little bit, those people have connections because they've been in that life, and that can
kind of exponential growth, yeah. And may say something just for us today in efforts to reach out. And of course, his critics are upset again. They're saying this is blasphemy. And they said he's blasphemy before healing, and now he's saying that you can't associate with these people. They're criticizing him here, and Jesus' response here is basically, "I'm a doctor, and doctors can't pick and choose their patients. Patients come to them, and if you have to associate with people with diseases to be a doctor, and that's sort of my job." And he quotes Hosea 6:6, which is mercy over sacrifice. We know that. God says, I desire mercy over sacrifice. Okay, then chapter 9, 14 through 17. We'll take a look at that. That's about the disciples of John coming in to ask a question. Make a mental note of this passage because in those 3 chapters, I'm sure David will get into this next week. John's disciples will come again and talk to him, ask him a question, and there's a very similar kind of thought pattern here. Have you ever noticed that there's some people that are just so hardened against somebody, they pick out somebody, they're so hardened against that person, no matter what good they possibly can do, there's hatred, and they can never say anything good about the person or see anything good about that person. And so I think Jesus is getting in this boat of being in that proverbial rock and hard place. Nothing he does, they're going to twist every single thing he does into something bad. So we got John's disciples, and they're saying, Jesus, why don't your disciples fast like us? A good Pharisee would fast twice a week. Probably John's disciples at least once a week, and Jesus' disciples are not doing that. And so Jesus responds with 3 images. Do you see those, what those are?
A piece of unshrunk cloth, and putting new wine in the old wine.
Absolutely. What does this say to us? What's Jesus trying to convey here?
There's something new coming.
Something new is coming. The old structures don't fit the new. The new structures don't fit the old ideas here. All right. Very quickly, the story of We have desperate people here. I'm certainly not going to read this because I think our small groups actually looked at this part of this passage recently. But we have the story of desperation. We got a synagogue leader. He comes. His daughter has died, and think about it, a synagogue leader was a big deal at this time. It had to be difficult for him to humble himself to actually ask for Jesus' help. But he makes a great faith statement here. It's an amazing faith statement. What does he ask Jesus to do? This isn't fixing a withered hand, which is a miracle in itself. He's asking for him to heal his daughter, who, by the way, is dead. She's not mostly dead. She's really dead. We know that from the standpoint of her being truly dead is because the people that were there, a poor person at the time in this era, had to hire, when you had a death in the family, you had to hire at least one wailing woman and 2 flute players. No kidding. That was tradition at this time. So Jairus could probably afford a lot more than that, more wailing people and more flute players. But they were out there. They knew he'd been hired because this person was truly dead. That was evidence that she was really dead. And they laughed at Jesus when he came and said, she's just asleep, and we'll handle that. Kind of interesting. We also have the great story of the person who was desperate, and she was restored again. We know the story from our small group. If you remember that story about the woman who was had a hemorrhage. She was completely unclean. She had been unclean for 12 years. She was an outcast, and she comes to Jesus for restoration. He heals her in a lot of ways. He heals her physically, but he also calls her daughter. And he also asks, who is this person? You know, who touched me? He wants to tell the community, this is the person, I have healed her, and she's a daughter of Israel. She is part of our family again. So pay attention to her. Accept her. All right? It's another restoration and a healing. Great. It's a great story. Then we got the demon-oppressed man. He was mute. And again, we hear that story, but we think about what did Jesus say? What was again the opposition growing? What did they say? He healed this man who had a demon.
The prince of demons.
That is complete blasphemy. You know, to accuse Jesus. He'll talk about that later, but it's complete blasphemy to do that, right? And he was disrupting the order of the day. Okay, last but not least, we have the compassion and mission of Jesus. And that last passage, 35 through 38, it tells 3 things that Jesus was doing. All right? Matthew summarizes all the passages 8 and 9 with these 3. 3 things. You see that? Taught in their synagogues, proclaimed the gospel of the kingdom, and healed every disease and affliction. And this is saying that Jesus is a very busy person. He's very busy at this time. And he looks out at the crowd and he says they were harassed and helpless, all right? And he feels, as a result, he looks at the crowd and he feels compassion. This is critical because, you know, power without compassion is terrifying, and compassion without power is helpless. So Jesus has both, the compassion and the power. One quick thing to point out here, Jesus wasn't leading a separatist movement. He wasn't concerned only about a righteous remnant here. He was stirred toward all the people. And this is abundant, you know, the idea of religious leaders in first and century Palestine. There were a lot of people leading movements at this time. The story I came across was, it's really tragic that the Jews rejected Jesus. The temple was torn down, but there were Jews still in Palestine after that. In the 2nd century, in the year 135, there was a man named Simon Bar Kokhba. And Simon Bar Kokhba led a major rebellion against Rome. And a lot of the Jews thought he was the Messiah. And he actually ruled for a while, like for 2 or 3 years, 135 to 138. And the Emperor Hadrian had enough of it, and he ordered the destruction again of the Jews. he slaughtered 580,000 Jews. So that was, the wrath. And they wouldn't follow Jesus, but they would follow a man like this. I guess finally, what we need to do is think about summarizing. Jesus has absolute authority. He's physical, disease, nature, spiritual over demons, moral over sin, existence over death. And so we saw some people had faith, we had some people had fear, and some people totally rejected him. And we also saw that, following Jesus requires a costly trust. So I would just kind of sum this up to say, what would it look like for us to really truly trust in Jesus' authority this week? Give that a little bit of thought. I think that's important. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for being here this morning. We're thankful for these words of Matthew. We're thankful for the instruction of your word. We're thankful for the blessing that it is. We're thankful for your Son who had power and authority over all things and still does. We pray, Father, you'll help us not just to see your authority, but also that we'll have trust in it and we'll follow you fully. In Jesus' name, amen.